There are some things in life you think you'll never have to spell out for your own family. Like, hey, maybe don't treat the lake house I bought for mom and dad like your personal Airbnb. But apparently, I was wrong. Wildly, humiliatingly wrong. I'm David. I'm 33 years old, no kids, never married. And this part matters. I've done pretty well for myself. I run a software consultancy, mostly remote. And yeah, it took years of grinding, some brutal failures, and enough caffeine to kill a small horse. But eventually, it paid off. I bought a loft downtown, I travel when I want, and most recently, I gave my parents a gift I'd dreamed about since I was in college. A lake house. Not a fixer-upper or some moldy shack with spiders the size of your hand. No, this place was gorgeous. Cedar wood siding, wraparound porch, private dock, and the kind of sunrises that make you feel like you're in a painting. It was my thank you to the two people who believed in me when I had nothing but a busted laptop and a $6 domain name. They cried when I handed them the keys. Real, ugly tears. Mom hugged me for so long I thought my ribs were going to snap. Dad just kept nodding and saying, "You shouldn't have, son. You really shouldn't have." Like he didn't believe it was real. And for a while, everything was perfect. They moved in late spring, just after their 40th anniversary. I told them I didn't want anything back. No rent, no strings, just enjoy it. Fish, read, sit on the porch and fall asleep to the sound of crickets. I visited a couple of weekends that summer, brought steaks and wine, helped Dad set up his new smoker, even installed a surround sound system in the living room so they could blast their jazz records and annoy the birds. But then things got weird. It started with small stuff. Missed calls. Mom would text me and say, "Sorry we've been hard to reach. It's been so busy here." Busy? In retirement? Dad wasn't answering his phone at all, and when I called their landline, someone would pick up and hang up immediately. I figured maybe they were just getting old, or maybe the cell signal by the lake sucked. No big deal. But then I started getting these vague messages from my sister, Rachel. Rachel is complicated. She's 36, married to a guy named Kyle who thinks he's the next Elon Musk just because he flips NFTs and once sold a startup idea to a hedge fund, which, fun fact, never launched. They live in the suburbs with their twin boys, and ever since Rachel became a mom, she's had this, "I'm the matriarch now" energy that drives everyone up a wall. She talks to my parents like they're senile toddlers, and ever since I bought the lake house, she's been dropping these weirdly passive-aggressive comments. Stuff like, "It must be nice to have enough money to play Santa Claus," or, gifts like that come with expectations. At first, I brushed it off. Family jealousy, maybe. But then she started texting me things like, "You should check in on mom and dad. They've been acting different lately." Or, "Don't you think it's weird they haven't invited you back?" At first, I thought maybe she was stirring up drama. Rachel's always been the type to poke a hornet's nest and then act shocked when she gets stung. But then a family friend, Mr. Halberd, this sweet old guy who used to fish with Dad, called me out of the blue. He sounded confused. "David," he said, "I went up to the lake last weekend, but your folks weren't there. Strange thing is, there were kids' toys all over the porch and some young man in a robe drinking whiskey. Told me your parents were traveling." Didn't seem too friendly. My stomach dropped. That's when I decided to drive up there. No text, no warning. I threw my overnight bag in the trunk, grabbed a bottle of wine I'd been saving for Dad, and made the 2-hour drive with my jaw clenched so hard I gave myself a headache. I remember thinking, there's got to be some explanation. Maybe they rented it to friends for a few weeks. Maybe Rachel was just watching the place. Maybe, but even then, I didn't fully believe it. Something felt off. The closer I got, the more that gut feeling turned into a cold certainty. I pulled up the gravel driveway around noon on a Friday. Late September, so the trees were starting to explode in color, fiery reds and golds and oranges. It should have been beautiful, but all I saw was the unfamiliar car in the driveway. A big black Escalade. Kyle's. And then I saw the grill still smoking on the porch, and my dad's favorite robe hanging off the shoulders of a man I hadn't seen in months. Kyle, barefoot, drinking my dad's Glenlivet straight from a tumbler like he was royalty. I didn't say a word, just stood there for a second, holding my bag, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Kyle saw me and didn't even flinch. He just raised the glass toward me like he was toasting a deal. Well, he said, grinning. "Look who decided to show up." I swallowed hard. "Where are my parents?" He took a sip, slow and theatrical. "Left weeks ago." Said something about visiting friends down south. Didn't say when they'd be back. They didn't tell me. Kyle shrugged. Maybe they forgot. Old age, you know how it is. I dropped my bag on the porch. Hard. The sound echoed through the trees. Get out. He laughed. Actually laughed. Come on, Dave. Don't be dramatic. We're just watching the place. Rachel said it was fine. You have 10 minutes, I said, stepping up onto the first stair, before I make you leave. That's when the smile slipped. He saw something in my face, something I wasn't even fully aware of, but it made his eyes narrow. He shifted slightly, like he wasn't sure if I was bluffing. And then, from inside the house, I heard a kid scream laughing. The twins. Playing Mario Kart on the TV I installed. And that's when I realized it wasn't just a visit. They'd moved in. I took a deep breath, my pulse pounding, and stared Kyle dead in the eye. Where are my parents? I asked again, slower this time. He looked away. For the first time, he didn't have a comeback. Just muttered. They left us a note. Said we could stay as long as we wanted. I stepped closer, inches from his face. Did they write that note to you? Or did you write it yourself? Kyle didn't answer, but his smirk was gone. I didn't go inside right away. I needed to breathe, to think, to stop myself from doing something reckless like yanking Kyle off the porch and tossing him into the lake, head first. I paced around the gravel drive, fists clenched, trying to understand what the hell had happened. This was my parents' dream home, their quiet place, their sanctuary. And now it smelled like someone grilled hot dogs and spilled whiskey on the deck chairs. The flower pots Mom arranged along the front steps were dead, cracked soil, brittle brown leaves. One was tipped over completely. The lawn hadn't been mowed in weeks. Everything looked used, disrespected. I stepped back onto the porch and yanked open the front door. Inside, the house was alive with sound, video games blaring from the living room, a child shouting something about blue shells, the microwave beeping insistently. And over it all, Rachel's voice, casually yelling from the kitchen. Kyle, can you tell Lucas to stop screaming? And don't forget we need more eggs. I stood frozen in the foyer. The layout was open concept, so I could see almost everything at once. The living room couch, covered in crumbs and rumpled blankets. The dining table, stacked with school books, laundry, and half-eaten bowls of cereal. The kitchen, where Rachel stood barefoot in one of Mom's aprons, flipping pancakes like she owned the place. She turned mid-flip and spotted me. Oh, she said, as if I'd surprised her on a stroll through Target. You're here. You're here, I repeated. My voice didn't even sound like mine. She shrugged. We've been staying here for a few weeks. Didn't Mom tell you? No. Huh. She turned back to the pan, unbothered. Well, I'm sure it just slipped her mind. She was in a rush when they left. Something about a road trip with the Palmers. Where are they, Rachel? She hesitated, just a second. But it was long enough. South Carolina, I think. Or maybe Georgia by now. They wanted to visit the mountains. They didn't tell me they were going anywhere. Well, she said, plating the pancakes. Maybe if you called more often. I called. I snapped. Dozens of times. I texted. I emailed. She didn't flinch. Just turned, fork in hand, and said, You sound really worked up. Want some breakfast? That's when I realized something was deeply wrong. Not just the lies, not just the silence, something worse. Rachel wasn't surprised. She wasn't scrambling to explain. She was confident, comfortable, like this had all been planned. I want to talk to Mom. Now, like I said, she's on the road. So call her. I don't think she has service. Try anyway. Rachel sighed, pulled out her phone, and tapped around for a second. See? She said, turning the screen toward me. The call went straight to voicemail. Told you. She set the phone down and started cutting pancakes for one of the twins, who had wandered in and plopped into a chair like this was their kitchen. Like this was their home. That's when it hit me. They were settling in. Not visiting. Not borrowing the place for a long weekend. They'd brought toys, school supplies, extra clothes, even the kids' favorite cereal. The garage door had a sticky note labeled Kyle's toolbox, taped to it. My dad's tools were gone from the workbench. And the master bedroom door? Closed. I opened it anyway. Inside, the bed was unmade, the closet ransacked. My mother's jewelry box was missing. My father's pipe rack was gone. Instead, there were piles of Rachel and Kyle's clothes. Her makeup was scattered on the vanity. A Target bag stuffed with men's socks sat beside the dresser. I turned around and walked back into the kitchen. Where are their things? Rachel looked at me like I was being dramatic again. In storage, I think. Mom said we could make ourselves comfortable. They didn't want us living in that cramped townhouse forever. The boys needed space. You put their stuff in storage? They did, she corrected. I helped. It was all rushed. But they agreed. I stood there, heart thudding in my chest, replaying every word she said, trying to find a crack, a slip, anything. But she was smooth. Too smooth. I want to see the note, I said. What note? The one Kyle mentioned. The one that said you could stay as long as you want. Show me. Her smile didn't waver, but something in her eyes flickered. I don't have it. Mom took it with her. Of course she did. I stared at her for a long time. You've always hated that I did well. She blinked, taken off guard. You've resented it since college. Since I got the scholarships, and you didn't. Since I bought my own car, my own place, and you had to ask Dad to co-sign your first lease. That's not. You hated that I gave them this place, I said, cutting her off. You hated seeing them so happy. Rachel's expression turned stony. You act like you're some kind of savior. But you don't even realize how smug you are. Flashing money around like it makes you better than us. Mom and Dad talk about you like you're a saint. David's so generous. David's so successful. Meanwhile, we're drowning in bills and trying to raise kids. So you decided to take the house. We didn't take anything, she snapped. They offered. I didn't believe her. Not for a second. But what scared me more was this. She believed herself. Or at least, she'd convinced herself enough to justify it. I didn't stay long. I didn't eat. I didn't speak to the twins. I walked out the door, got in my car, and drove until I found cell service. Then I tried everything. I called my parents' numbers, both cell and landline, every hour. No answer. I left voicemails. I emailed. I even messaged them through Facebook, something I hadn't done since 2015. Nothing. Then I tried the Palmers. Mom's friends from college. They hadn't seen her in months. I tried Aunt Susan, Uncle Jeremy, even my old high school English teacher, who randomly ran into my parents at a farmer's market once and still sends them Christmas cards. No one had heard from them. It was like they'd vanished. 2 days later, I drove back to the city and stopped by their old condo. Locked. Empty. A few flyers stuffed in the mailbox. I peeked through the windows. Dusty floors, no furniture. It had been cleared out. I checked in with the front desk. The guy on duty remembered them but hadn't seen them since early August. Said they left in a hurry. Moving truck came one morning, gone by evening. I finally lost it in the parking lot. Sat in my car and just stared at the steering wheel, trying to figure out what reality I was in. Had they really left without telling me? Had they really handed the house over to Rachel and Kyle without even a heads up? I started thinking back, trying to find clues. Mom's odd texts. Dad going quiet. Rachel's weird tone every time the Lakehouse came up. Maybe they felt guilty. Maybe Rachel guilt them into thinking she deserved it more. Maybe they were sick of feeling indebted. Or maybe they didn't leave at all. That thought chilled me more than anything else. So I called a lawyer. Not to file anything yet, just to ask questions. Hypotheticals. What happens if I gift a house but the deed is still under my name? It was. What happens if someone squats in it without permission? What proof would I need to reclaim possession? The answers weren't simple, especially with family involved. But what bothered me most wasn't the legal mess. It was the silence. My parents had vanished. No goodbye, no explanation, no contact. And the longer it stretched on, the more it felt like a betrayal. The final blow came 2 weeks later. A letter arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper typed. David, we're fine. We needed time to ourselves. Don't worry. The house is in good hands. Rachel and Kyle will take care of it. Please don't try to contact us right now. We need space. Love, Mom and Dad. No signature. No phone number. Just that. I stared at it for hours. Reread it a dozen times, hunting for hidden meaning. Were they coerced into writing it? Did they really want to be gone? Or was Rachel manipulating them somehow? That night, I didn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, replaying every interaction from the last 6 months. The hugs, the tears, the smiles when I handed them the keys. And then the silence. And then the letter. Something inside me shifted. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about control. About erasure. My gift had been twisted, my name scrubbed from the story, my presence rewritten as a threat. I wasn't going to let that stand. I opened my laptop, pulled up the original deed, downloaded every document I had. Photos, emails, voicemails, even a video of the day I surprised them with the keys. Then I made a list. Not a to-do list. A war plan. Because if they thought I was just going to vanish too, they had no idea who they were dealing with. For the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. My apartment felt hollow. My phone, a device that once buzzed constantly with texts, emails, and FaceTimes from my parents, was dead silent. The framed photo of us on my bookshelf, taken just 3 months ago in front of the Lakehouse, suddenly looked like evidence from a crime scene. I stared at it for a long time one night. We were all smiling. Mom was holding the keys, her eyes crinkled with joy. Dad had his arm around me. Rachel stood stiffly off to the side, lips tight, like she'd swallowed something bitter. At the time, I thought it was just one of her moods. Now I wasn't so sure. I didn't know how to grieve something that wasn't technically dead. My parents were alive, somewhere. But they'd cut me off with a single letter and left me with questions I couldn't answer. And Rachel was acting like nothing happened. Like she hadn't orchestrated an entire takeover of the house I bought, the family I thought I knew, and the version of reality I used to live in. I kept checking my parents' social media. Nothing. Their profile still existed, but hadn't been updated since July. I even tried calling their old landline a few more times, just to hear the ring. Every attempt went straight to voicemail. I'd never felt so erased. The lawyer I spoke to had been kind, but cautious. "You're in a legal gray zone," she said. "Technically, the house is yours. If you can prove they're living there without permission, you have options. But if your parents, who were the intended recipients, gave verbal or even written permission, things get murky." I told her about the letter I received. She asked if I had proof they wrote it. I didn't. No return address. Just printed text. "What do you want to do?" she finally asked. I didn't have an answer. For weeks, I drifted. My work suffered. I missed deadlines. I bailed on meetings. I told clients I was going through a personal situation, which was the truth, but didn't come close to explaining the mental spiral I was caught in. I stopped going to the gym. Ate takeout every night. Let dishes pile up. For the first time in a decade, I considered quitting. Walking away from everything. Just starting over somewhere else. Somewhere quiet. But the thing about hitting bottom is, eventually, you either stay there or you find something to climb. For me, the turning point came from the most unexpected source, a friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Rob. We were roommates during my first startup gig, way back when I was still eating instant noodles for dinner and running on 3 hours of sleep. He moved to Seattle years ago, started a family, got out of the tech rat race. We hadn't talked in ages. But somehow he saw something I'd posted, a vague Instagram story with a lake photo and the caption, "Not what it used to be." He called me that night. "You alive?" he asked. "Barely. You look like you've been hit by a freight train." I kind of have. And I told him. Everything. The house. The silence. Rachel. The letter. The feeling that my entire family had been hollowed out and rearranged while I was left outside, watching through the windows. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he said, "You know what I remember about you? You never let anyone tell you who you were. Not even back when your bank account had 2 digits. You built something out of nothing. Don't let this define you. I don't know who I am without them." Then it's time to figure that out. It sounds cliche, I know, like some made-for-TV pep talk. But something about hearing it from someone who knew me before the success, before the Lakehouse, before the money, made it hit harder. It shook something loose. That night, I started a journal. Just a few lines. A habit I hadn't touched since high school. I wrote, "They took the house. They took the silence. But they don't get to take me." The next morning, I made a list. Not a war plan this time. A recovery plan. Things I'd let slide. People I'd ghosted. Goals I'd buried under anger and confusion. And bit by bit, I started digging myself out. First, work. I called clients. Apologized. Took accountability. Some were understanding. Some weren't. But the ones that mattered stayed. Then health. I hired a trainer. Started running again. Nothing intense. Just slow, steady movement. I stopped eating like a teenager and cooked my own meals again. Chicken, rice, vegetables. The basics. But the act of making something for myself felt grounding. I went back to therapy. I'd only done it once, years ago, after a bad breakup. This time, I told the whole story. My therapist, Mara, didn't offer instant solutions. She just asked questions that made me think. What do you think you were trying to give your parents with the Lakehouse? A life they never had. And what do you think you lost when they gave it away? My place in the family. Or maybe, she said, you're finally seeing the place you actually had. That stuck with me. Maybe what hurt most wasn't just the betrayal. It was the illusion shattering. I'd always believed that my generosity would bind us tighter, that love could be secured through sacrifice. But now, staring down the cold truth of what Rachel had done and what my parents had allowed, I realized I'd been trying to buy something that should have been given freely. Acceptance, respect, family. It took time, but the fog started to lift. I got back into a rhythm, reconnected with old friends, took a weekend trip to Colorado with Rob and his family. I watched his daughter build a snowman and felt something thaw in me that had been frozen for months. And slowly, I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes for messages that never came. But the house still haunted me. One night, about 3 months after that first confrontation, I drove back to the lake. Not to storm the porch or yell at Kyle, just to see it. I parked across the road, hidden by trees, and watched the lights flicker through the windows like a stranger peeking into someone else's life. There was a wreath on the door, Christmas lights on the railing, a kid's bike leaning against the shed. The dock was covered in frost. My dock. I sat in my car for an hour. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just watched. And I realized something. They didn't deserve it. The house, the view, the peace. It wasn't just a structure. It was a symbol of my effort, my love, my belief that family meant something. But Rachel had warped it into a power grab. And my parents, they let her. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight for the house out of spite. I wasn't going to win just to prove a point. I was going to reclaim it. Not just the property, but what it meant. On my terms. With precision. With patience. Because now, I had something Rachel didn't. Clarity. She thought I was still reeling. Still broken. Still too weak to push back. But I was back on my feet. And I was done playing the good son. I didn't rush it. That was the difference this time. Old me would have kicked down the front door, slapped a deed on the table, and demanded everyone get out. But the new me? The one who'd spent weeks rebuilding his sanity, stitching his identity back together from scraps, learning to breathe again? He understood that real power doesn't show up shouting. It waits, watches, sharpens. So I began quietly. The first step was control, reclaiming what was mine on paper before I took it back in person. The deed was already in my name. I'd bought the house outright. No mortgage, no liens, no co-signers. I'd filed the property tax under my LLC for tax purposes, another small but important detail that Rachel had conveniently ignored. In the eyes of the county and the IRS, I wasn't just a generous son. I was the legal owner. I scheduled a consultation with a real estate attorney named Eliza, someone recommended by a friend who'd gone through a brutal property dispute with his ex-business partner. Eliza was sharp, calm, and had that kind of surgical confidence that made me sit up straighter within minutes of meeting her. I want to take back my house, I said plainly. She raised an eyebrow. Do they know it's not theirs? Oh, they know. Do you have proof of permission granted to them to stay? No written lease. No written anything. Just a lot of manipulation and one sketchy note with no signature. She nodded slowly, fingers steepled. That helps. Eliza walked me through the process. Because Rachel and Kyle were technically unauthorized occupants, squatters, albeit family, the legal path was slower than I wanted, but airtight if done right. I couldn't just change the locks and throw their things on the lawn, tempting as that was. But I could begin formal proceedings, demand possession, file notices, and that was just the legal side. The revenge, that came next. While Eliza prepared the paperwork, I went to work building a quiet case. Something that wouldn't just remove them from the Lakehouse, but strip them of the moral high ground they'd been standing on. I wasn't interested in a simple eviction. I wanted scorched earth. So I started watching. I hired a private investigator. Nothing too dramatic. Just a guy named Vince who had a camera, a drone, and a very polite way of describing people's worst decisions. He spent 2 weeks parked near the Lakehouse, collecting footage, timestamps, and notes. What he found was gold. Kyle had turned the house into a part-time rental. Not officially, of course. Nothing on Airbnb. But he'd been hosting friends for weekends and accepting cash through Venmo. Vince caught it all. Different cars rolling in Friday nights. Couples with coolers and Bluetooth speakers. Groups of guys grilling at midnight. Drunk laughter echoing off the water. There was even one particularly damning clip of Kyle giving someone a tour and saying, "Yeah, it's our family place. Been in the family for years. My wife's brother bought it for our parents, but they handed it down to us when they got too old to manage it." Handed it down? Like it was a royal title? Rachel, meanwhile, had been enrolling her kids in the local school district. She listed the Lakehouse address on all their paperwork. She had mail redirected. She'd even opened a utilities account in her name, which, ironically, helped my case. More proof that they were trying to establish residency in a property they didn't own. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. They weren't just living there. They were sinking roots into my foundation, rewriting the narrative, removing me from the picture entirely. So I started rewriting my own. I called in a favor from an old friend of mine, Sierra, who worked in PR crisis management. She'd helped me once when a client's product launched with a nasty bug that went viral on Twitter. This time, I didn't want a media campaign. I just needed help crafting one very specific message. A letter. To my parents. Not a text. Not a voicemail. A real, printed letter on thick paper with a wax seal. Old school. I wanted it to feel serious. Unignorable. It read, "Mom, Dad, I know you asked for space. I've given you that. I haven't forced contact. I haven't shown up unannounced. But I need you to understand something. The Lakehouse is mine. I gave it to you as a gift, and you accepted it in good faith. But you never gave Rachel permission to live there, and you never told me you were leaving. Kyle is lying. Rachel is lying. And I have proof. Videos. Documents. Witnesses. I'm writing not to threaten, but to warn. They are trespassing. They are defrauding people. And they are dragging our family name through the mud. If you still care about the relationship we had, the relationship I thought we had, then I'm asking you to make this right. Because if you don't, I will. With love, David." I mailed it to 3 addresses, just in case. Their old condo, on the off chance they checked their mailbox, the address listed on their driver's licenses, and their P.O. box I remembered from when I used to mail them holiday cards. 2 weeks passed. No response. Not a word. But I knew they received it. Because on the 3rd Sunday of the month, I spotted a car parked on the road outside the Lakehouse. Not Kyle's Escalade. A silver Prius. My mother's. Vince sent me a blurry photo. She was sitting in the driver's seat, engine running, just watching the house. She didn't go inside. Didn't knock. Just sat there. And then drove away. It broke something in me and mended something else, all at once. She knew. They both did. But they weren't ready to face it. So I pushed forward. The legal notices were filed. Eliza sent an official letter of demand to vacate, giving Rachel and Kyle 30 days to leave the premises or face formal eviction. We had them served while Kyle was mowing the lawn. He took the envelope like it was a pizza menu and tossed it onto the porch without reading it. I smiled when Vince sent me the video. That same week, I activated the backup plan. You see, months ago, when I bought the Lakehouse, I installed a smart home system, full control from an app. Thermostat, security cameras, even the water heater. I never activated the remote settings because I handed control to my parents. But once Rachel changed the Wi-Fi and tried to lock me out, I called the manufacturer, verified my ownership, had the system reset and transferred back to my account. And now, I had a dashboard full of access. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. But it was leverage. I turned off the outside lights. Then the porch heater. Then the garage door access. Small things. Inconvenient, not illegal. Rachel texted me that night. "Hey, something's wrong with the house Wi-Fi. Can you fix it?" I didn't reply. A week later, Kyle emailed me. "Not sure what you're trying to do here, but this isn't a good look. If you want to talk like adults, we're open to discussing a buyout. We've really made the place our home." A buyout. He wanted me to pay them to leave. That's when I knew I had them exactly where I wanted them. Complacent. Entitled. Blinded. The real storm was coming. I just needed one final piece. I made a trip back to the town near the Lakehouse. Not to the property, never directly, but to the town clerk's office. I wanted to double-check the county records, make sure everything Eliza had was correct. While there, I ran into someone I didn't expect. Mr. Halbert, Dad's old fishing buddy. He was standing in line to renew his fishing license, wearing the same dusty cap and windbreaker he always wore. When he saw me, his face lit up. "David, haven't seen you in ages. Thought you'd vanished." "Not quite," I said, and after a pause, "Have you seen my parents?" He shifted uncomfortably. "A while back. Maybe August?" "They looked tired." "What do you mean?" He lowered his voice. "They stopped by my house one night. Said they needed to clear out of the lake place. Fast. Didn't explain why. Just asked if I had any spare moving boxes. Your dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. That didn't match what Rachel said at all. Did they say where they were going? No. Just said they'd be out of state for a while. Told me not to tell anyone. Even me. He gave me a long look. Especially you. My chest tightened. Why? Why especially me? What were they running from? Or, worse, what had they been made to believe? As I left the clerk's office, a thought burrowed into my brain and refused to leave. What if Rachel had spun a story so warped, so twisted, that even my own parents didn't know what was real anymore? What if they thought I was the villain? That night, I went home, turned off every light, and sat at my kitchen table in the dark, flipping through every document, every screenshot, every shred of proof I had. And then I made a new folder. I labeled it, The Reckoning, because I wasn't just taking back my house anymore. I was taking back my name, and they had no idea what was coming next. The morning I decided to pull the trigger, the lake was shrouded in fog. A quiet mist curled over the surface like the house itself was holding its breath. It felt right. Cinematic, even. Not because I needed drama, but because some ending should come with weather. The eviction notice expired the week before. 30 days. That's how long Rachel and Kyle had to leave peacefully, without fanfare. I gave them the grace period, even extended it by 3 days, just to be cautious. I had every legal document lined up. Every time-stamped video, every utility bill, every screenshot of Kyle playing king of the castle while flipping the property for side cash. But they didn't budge. Instead, Kyle doubled down. He posted an ad on a local classified board, offering exclusive weekend getaways at a luxurious family lake house. He even used my drone photo, the one I took when I first gave it to Mom and Dad. The image that used to make me proud now felt like a punch to the gut. So I called Eliza. Let's do it, I said. She didn't ask twice. We filed for a formal unlawful detainer action. It moved fast, faster than normal, because of the mountain of evidence I'd built and the absence of any actual lease or legal defense on their side. They never even showed up to the hearing. Too confident, too arrogant, maybe too lazy. The judge awarded me possession in full. No contest. A court-ordered eviction was scheduled for the following Friday. But I didn't want it to be just a legal footnote. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted the narrative they'd built, the one where I was some greedy brother, jealous of their new beginning, to unravel in front of them like a burning rope bridge. So I invited an audience. Not literally, but symbolically. I called Mr. Halbert. I emailed Aunt Susan and Uncle Jeremy. I reached out to the Palmers, my parents' friends down south, and filled them in. I told them everything. Calmly, clearly, factually. I didn't slander. I didn't dramatize. I just told the truth. And then I booked a professional photographer. Not to capture the eviction. I'm not that cruel. But to document the condition of the property. I wanted every scuff mark, every broken railing, every water-damaged floorboard visible. Because if they thought they could trash the place and walk away without consequences, they were sorely mistaken. The night before the eviction, I sent one final text to Rachel. You have until 8 a.m. tomorrow. After that, it's no longer in your hands. She didn't reply, but I know she read it. Because at 6:43 a.m., 2 hours before the sheriff arrived, I got a notification from the smart home system. Front door, unlocked. Living room, motion detected. Garage, opened. They were scrambling. I waited until 9 a.m. to arrive. Gave them space. Gave them time. When I pulled up to the house, the sheriff was already there, standing by his cruiser with a clipboard. The front door was wide open. Rachel was on the porch, red-faced and shouting at Kyle, who was dragging a suitcase down the steps with one hand and carrying a broken lamp in the other. The twins were sitting in the back seat of the Escalade, watching cartoons on an iPad. It was surreal. I parked at the edge of the driveway, stepped out in a clean black coat, and walked slowly toward the porch. Rachel saw me and froze. Her mouth opened like she was going to speak, but nothing came out. So I spoke first. Morning. She swallowed. You didn't have to do this. I did, I said. You left me no choice. This was Mom and Dad's house. They gave it to us. No, I said, calm and firm. I gave it to them, and they never gave it to you. Her eyes flicked toward the sheriff, as if hoping for backup. But he didn't move. You evicted your own sister, she hissed. Your nephews. You squatted in a house you didn't own. You rented it out for money. You committed fraud. Kyle stepped forward, chest puffed. You're gonna regret this, man. This is family. I looked him dead in the eye. You don't get to use that word anymore. He opened his mouth again, but I raised a hand. I have the deed. I have the footage. I have witness statements. The judge didn't even hesitate. If you want to keep pushing this, I'll press charges for trespassing and tax fraud. Rachel's face crumpled. She knew I meant it. They spent the next 20 minutes finishing the loading process, but they weren't graceful. Every box was slammed. Every drawer was yanked. At one point, Rachel threw a pile of blankets onto the gravel like she was trying to make a point. But there was no crowd, no audience, no one to cheer for them, just silence. And me, watching. When the Escalade finally reversed down the driveway, the twins stared at me through the rear window. I didn't wave. I didn't smile. I just watched them vanish through the trees. And then it was mine again. Not just legally, but emotionally. I walked inside. The place was a mess. Crumbs, stains, broken blinds, drawings on the walls in crayon. But I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity, peace. I stood in the center of the living room, closed my eyes, and listened. It was quiet, still, and for the first time since summer, it felt like home again. The fallout was swift. That weekend, Aunt Susan called me crying. I had no idea, she said. We thought you cut everyone off. Rachel told us you went corporate cold, that you were trying to buy the family's love and flipped when they didn't worship you. She lied, I said simply. She always was good at that, she whispered. The Palmers emailed me. They'd received the same story, how I kicked Mom and Dad out after they graciously let Rachel move in. They were stunned when I sent them the full timeline. They promised to reach out to my parents and tell them what they knew now. I didn't hear from my parents for a long time after that. Weeks passed, then a month, then another. I didn't push. I let it breathe. And then, one snowy morning in February, I found a card in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a single note. You were right. We're sorry. We're still figuring out what we let happen. But we're proud of you. Love. Mom and Dad. That's all it said. No excuses. No attempts to rewrite the past. Just truth. I stood there on my porch, snow piling up around my boots, and let the weight of it sink in. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't a full repair. But it was a start. That spring, I hired a contractor to restore the Lakehouse. New flooring. Fresh paint. I kept one thing, though. The old oak dining table, scarred and stained from years of meals and spilled juice and late-night board games. It wasn't pretty, but it was real. I didn't put the house up for sale. I didn't rent it out. I just kept it as mine. A reminder of what I lost, of what I rebuilt, and of what I'll never let anyone take again. The next time I stood on the porch, the lake was still. I poured a glass of Glenlivet, stared out at the water, and whispered, "Welcome back."